I have to say something.
What is it, Graham?
I'm a werewolf.
What?
We are talking Grandma Werewolf from 2017, and this is written and directed by Zachary Will. Now, this is a clearly very low budget, kind of family horror film. The story focuses on 3 generations of a family. The grandma clearly being a werewolf, but it focuses us on the father who is split from his wife, and he's looking after his 2 children and taking them to grandma's house, unbeknownst to them that she's actually a werewolf. Upon getting there, somehow the grandma forgets it's a full moon and ends up being found out that she's a werewolf and kind of goes running off in the woods. She turns the granddaughter into a werewolf as well. And now we have the father and the grandson chasing after them, trying to stop them, along with a couple of cops and a werewolf hunter. What'll happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So, let's talk about it. So this is a low budget, and it's also a kind of family horror comedy. So if you are expecting a scary movie, a bloody movie, a movie where it's taken seriously, that isn't this. This is more like a pantomime, is the best way I would describe it, with kind of horror ideas. But it's really a very broad family movie in a way. Why in a way? We'll come on to that. What works though? Now, I understand the writer-director here is quite young, and as such, you know, not a huge amount of experience and all that. But I'm going to judge the film as I would any other. I'm not going to give any sort of leeway because of that, because I think it's not fair to really to do that to everyone else, you know. So, but it's worth mentioning. As far as I understand, the director is pretty young, like late teens, early 20s, something like that. As far as I know, when he made this, anyway. So it's relatively competently put together in regards to a technical elements. You know, the camera placement, variety of shots, close-ups, you know, panning shots, wide shots, etc. Framing is all fairly good. The lighting, it's all kind of quite well lit. The audio mixing is quite, proficiently done. So on a technical basis, I think it looks relatively well put together. And I assume that there's other people that are helping in these aspects as well. But nonetheless, it does look like at least they've used decent equipment and stuff like that. So although it is obviously a low budget movie, at least it looks like there's some degree of professionalism and being competent kind of behind the camera at the very least in regards to technical elements. All right. The idea is kind of a fun, goofy idea. Is it funny? I mean, there's a couple of references and mildly amusing things. There's one of the kind of the ways our father and grandson tried to stop the werewolf is to learn magic, and they did this by going to this dude's house who's some sort of sorcerer. And, he starts getting them to sweep the floors, and they because they've seen Karate Kid, that's what they think they're doing. But they're just sweeping the floors and so on. So there's a couple of, sillier gags like that, and sort of references and things. I wouldn't say it's necessarily, gonna make you laugh out loud or anything. A couple of mildly amusing sequences. And I think having a generational situation with werewolves is interesting, because obviously this is maybe reading too much into it here, but if you look at werewolves in the wild, werewolves. Look at actual wolves in the wild. The way that the pack works and stuff. They put up the elderly ones in the front of the pack and things. So, you know, there is definitely a kind of seniority in actual kind of wolf packs and things, which this movie doesn't really ever reference or anything, but at least there's something that could have been done with that, I suppose. And I think this movie is suitable for children, suitable for families. Will they find it interesting? I'm going to come on to that. But if you want to have something to put on in front of a young child, not even a sort of tween, I think this is too old, you know, this is too young for them, but a sort of younger child, like less than 10, and this will be something that they would potentially be suitable for them, because there's no blood, there's no killing, you know, there's no real scary scenes or anything like that. But if they want to watch a kind of a horror film, this is about as you know, as tame as watching like a 1920s Wolfman or something like that. You know, it's kind of like that sort of level of kind of horror. If you say, they were probably those old kind of like, you know, Universal monsters and things were probably scarier than this, to be brutally honest. So let's talk about what doesn't work. Okay, and let's stay with the tone of this movie, because I'm not really sure who this movie is made for. It's so juvenile in regards to its tone. It would make you think it's aimed at a kiddie audience. So I think along the lines of Goosebumps or something like that, perhaps. But it's not really visually interesting for a young audience. It is a lot of a middle-aged man and his son running around in the woods with sort of dialogue. There's not actually a lot of werewolf in this movie, and then we kind of get this, they learn magic, like, oh, just say some words and these lights will happen. But it's not exactly like a flashy film in regards to visuals. I have to say, the tonal wise, I think it's aiming for a young audience, but visually speaking, I just can't see a young person finding this movie interesting. There's just not enough. And the movie's main character is probably the middle-aged dad, to be honest, and it's not exactly going to kind of like make kids want to watch it. So I'm not sure who this movie's actually meant to be for, because I think it's kind of aimed at no one particularly. You know, families, if you're watching with a child, I think the child will be bored, and it's just too goofy, I think, for an adult to get any enjoyment out of it. I mean, there's often talk about how Pixar is, you know, suitable for kids, for example, but then adults will enjoy it as well. This is not the case in either of these markets with this one. Okay, let's talk about the cast and the actors here. So we get our grandma, but she kind of looks practically the same age as the dad, which I found weird. You know, she doesn't look particularly old and he looks quite old. So they kind of look about the same age. Maybe she's a little bit older, but it doesn't look by much. So that was the first thing that was a little weird. The other thing I have to say as well, the acting is quite poor. Who fares the best? The two child actors, the grandkids. I would suggest they probably are the best, but the adult actors, I've got to say, are not brilliant. Let me just say that. I mean, there's a degree of kind of playing these cartoonish pantomime characters, which I understand. In particular, the two police officers are like super sort of goofy, but the kind of the dad, for example, I just think it's bad acting, to be brutally honest. So yeah, the acting is, you know, is to the point where with some scenes it's like I just can't watch it because it's so awkward in the acting. The werewolf itself there's werewolves, but there is more than one. There is like, it's just a rubber mask, and that's basically it. And then, funnily, we have like, you see like cuts and things in what they're wearing where I suppose it's meant to be that they've sort of burst out of their clothes, but it's clearly just like scissor holes and things, you know. It doesn't really make sense. They're just, the clothes aren't like too small or anything. They've just like, it's just got scissor holes in the, and then a bit of fur coming out. Yeah, it's just like, it's just rubber masks basically. And then just story-wise, it's just super dull. It's just super dull. As I say, the majority of the time is the dad and his kids running around. We don't really see much of the werewolf. We get a few like peripheral characters here and there, and it's too much of that. Had they wanted to make this a kids film, you would have really followed the werewolf and just have them causing chaos and maybe having the kids trying to clear up, you know, try and stop Grandma from making too much of a kind of chaos. But that isn't what we've got. Instead, we've got the werewolf is off screen a lot of the time doing stuff, and then it's just like the dad, who's not a good actor, and milling around. Brilliant. And then we got a few plot threads here, like we've got a werewolf hunter, which you think is going to be some type of interesting dynamic or confrontation. Let me just tell you, that ends in nothing. So I have to say, you know, it's not a movie I can recommend for anyone. As an adult, I don't want, it's not good, but I'm thinking even as a kid, would I be able to recommend this? And the answer is no. There's nothing here to actually kind of say this movie succeeds in any way. I've got to be honest with you, and this is going to sound hard, but the only real plaudits I can give this movie are on its technical elements. Story-wise, you know, character-wise, VFX-wise, there's nothing. There's nothing to recommend. So it's going to be a low score of 2 out of 10, I'm afraid. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.